Well, folks, once again, Captain Boat Builder here with you in my basement boatyard. Like to welcome you back, another episode, and unfortunately, it's just more work on the Almas. Sometimes I think, how come we have so many episodes on the same thing? But what I realized is the Almas, they're like building two little boats, and they take quite a bit of time. I'm getting close. Pretty soon we'll be thinking about painting and moving on. And then I realized that this entire conversion of the Viola 14 to a Trimaran is pretty much just four pieces. It's two Amas, two Akas. Got to connect them together and hook them up with a boat, and off you go. So I hope you'll be able to pick up a little trick here or there, something that might help you with your own build. Excuse me. And once again, we're back to the Amas. After watching an awful lot of videos, it dawned on me that most of the people who have kayaks or sailing canoes modified with these Amas, they get on and off the boat at the beach. They beach launch their boats. And so getting in and out of the boat's fairly easy. But I'm going to be getting in and out of this boat off of a floating dock. And so I realized that my first step is probably going to be onto the Ama itself. And I have checked with John Harris about the structural part of the boat, and I've got a few modifications here, and he said should be no problem with me stepping on to the center section of the Ama. I've made a few modifications here I wanted to show you. I've added two bulkheads. I've added this bulkhead here and this one here. So now between the two Aka supports, this one and the one in the back, I now have four bulkheads to absorb the weight when I step on the boat, and I will be doing this carefully. But I've also taken these panels, these are the deck panels that go between the supports for the Akas, and I have two layers of 4-ounce cloth on one side, and then I have another layer of 4-ounce cloth on the inside. So in addition to the wood itself, I now have 3 layers of 4-ounce cloth to strengthen it. And looks like it's going to be plenty strong for this center section between here and here to support my weight when I step off of the dock. We'll see. Well, in my constant search for a perfect finish, or as near as I could get, I decided that it's much easier. These are the deck panels. There's 6 of them. It's much easier to sand these, to sand the epoxy while they're on the table, clamped down. It's much easier to sand them now instead of when they're glued onto the Amas. I'm using a random orbital, and I'm using 320 paper, and the 320 paper cuts much more slowly, which means there's much less chance that you're going to cut right through and damage the fiberglass. Again, remember, this is 3 coats of epoxy so that I have something to sand. And I think by the time I get these all sanded out, and it's going pretty quickly, I think what I'm going to do is when they're glued down, the final finishing will actually be the varnish. I think I have enough epoxy. But it's just something that you might think about. It's easy to do flat on the table, and especially with the random orbital and the vacuum, it's not too much mess, and you're going to get a really slick finish. Well, it seems like it's taken forever, but I'm finally ready to glue down all 6 of the deck panels. Here are the 2 forward and 2 aft deck panels at the pointy end of the boat. They've got 1 coat of epoxy on the underside. You're looking at the inside. That's just to keep any moisture from accumulating and soaking into the wood. Then, so those are ready to go down, and they're still wet, which will help with the bond. Right here, I've got the 2 big panels that go in between the supports for the Akas. And you notice I've sanded the edges. Remember, I added extra fiberglass underneath. So I've sanded the edges to get a good bond on the shear clamps. And now you can see that I've got all of the shear clamps coated with epoxy, and it's starting to sink in. I want to be sure that it penetrates as much as I need it to. And then when I get ready to glue the deck down, I'm going to be using epoxy, and I'm going to mix in, I'll show you what I'm going to use. It's worked out pretty darn well. I'm using this West System 404 high density adhesive filler. You mix it up fairly thick and it's really sticky and it works great. So I'm getting ready to glue everything down. You can see raided my wife's kitchen to get vegetable cans. I'll be using those to hold the deck panels down nice and flush against the rails. I also wanted to show you, if you look at these panels here, you can see there's like little black lines on the edge. And what I did with the dry fitting was that I put them in place, and then I ran a marker underneath along the edge. So when I cut it out, I cut it just a little bit beyond the mark. So when I glue these things in place, there'll be a lot less extra to grind off and sand off. So I'm just about ready to glue everything together, and I can't believe the deck is finally going to be done. Well, it's taken me pretty much all day, but now I'm finally finished. I've got the deck glued down all the way around, and you can see I've used a combination of clamps and food cans and paint cans, and I've got some lead weights on the other side, and everything is designed to hold the deck down. I've also been able to make some fillets here, right there on the support for the Akas. I'll be putting some fiberglass on that later. It's taken a long time because I wanted it to be correct. I didn't want to have any oozing and epoxy that I'd have to glue later. So I spent a lot of time cleaning up. I don't know what we're having for dinner, but a lot of it's right down here on the boats. So tomorrow I'll be taking everything off and we'll see just how it turned out. I think the deck is going to be really nice, but like I said, it took me all day. One thing that I wanted to point out as you're working on the deck and the joint between the deck right here and the hull planking, you can see that I've got just a little bit of overlap there. I haven't worked on that yet. I'm going to be using the spoke shave and some block sanding to get that nice and smooth. But the thing that I wanted to show you is that if, and that's a big if you're going to use any kind of molding to make a just like a little railing along the side of the boat, I'm going to be sort of copying the rub rail that I have on the Viola 14. You can see here that you want this to be straight. This is the hull, this is the edge of the deck. And you can see that there's an angle there. In other words, the hull doesn't come straight up and make 90 degrees on the deck. So as you're tapering this down to meet the deck, be sure that you pay attention to this angle, because what you want, if you're going to put a little tow rail on there or something, a little rub rail, is you want to be sure that it lines up like this, so that on the top you get perfect contact and you'll have a very tiny seam. If you don't do that, if you round off this edge right here, if you round this edge off, in other words, it doesn't run straight up from the hull plank. If you round this corner off, that's fine if you're not going to have any kind of a rub rail. But if you are going to have a rub rail, it's got to sit flush like this. So just work on the edge carefully and be sure that if you're using a rub rail, be sure that you get the right kind of fit. Because once you sand this off, then you're going to have a big gap in here that you're going to have to fill in with compound. It's not going to look that great. It's a small point, but it makes a really big difference. Starting to get the Almas finished, getting close to time for fiberglass and paint and varnish. What I've done is turned them over, of course, and I've got the blue tape running on both sides of the center line of the bottom. And I'm going to use that for controlling the resin. I'm going to put some fiberglass right on the edge. But I did want to show you that the tape sort of highlights the seam between the two halves, which I tried to get as uniform as possible. I think the results are pretty good. I don't see too many wiggles. I think the hulls are nice and straight, and if there is any wiggling, only the fish will be able to see it. And what I'm planning to do now, which is a slight departure from the directions, is on this tiny little seam right here, I'm going to put some fiberglass tape, just a thin strip, and then I'll be cutting it here, cut the edge off sharp there, cut the edge off sharp there. So I'm going to wind up with a strip of fiberglass tape. It's only going to be about 1/4 of an inch wide, and then when I fiberglass the hulls, the fiberglass main pieces will lay up right to that edge. And the reason I'm doing this is I have never had much luck in overlapping one piece of fiberglass on another like this, and that little edge where there's an overlap. No matter how carefully I sand it, I can't get rid of it in the final paint, and it shows up. So I'm working on an alternative plan here. We'll see if it works. It's probably not necessary, but I took 4-ounce fiberglass cloth and covered both sides of the bulkhead here where the acas are making their connection. It's on both sides, and it's also tabbed in down to the deck on both sides. I think the bulkhead itself is strong enough to handle the loads, but I thought maybe coating it with fiberglass, the 4-ounce stuff on both sides, would help with the compression load, because there's going to be bolts, 2 bolts that are going to go through each one of these, and that's where all the load of the aca is transmitted. So it's just a little extra step I took, might not have even been necessary. It's been kind of a slow process, but now I have the first, well, the only layer of 4-ounce cloth on one side. I'm just doing half at a time, one side of the ama. This is the first coat. Then there's going to be the fill coat, the gloss coat, maybe 2 gloss coats, and I just keep rolling it on. But all the work trying to get the hulls straight seems to be paying off. They look pretty straight to me. There's a few edge wrinkles, and I can work on those a little bit. But this is the layer of 4-ounce cloth, and this is just the first coat. I'll do 2 more today, and then after that, I'll be trimming up these edges. And then flipping it over and doing the other side. One thing I've done as I put the fiberglass cloth on the sides of the boat is I ran a piece of tape on the inside, you can see right here, so that any resin that might go through the cloth will be contained right here. And so what that does is when you get ready to take it off, this was all done with a razor knife. Just cut right along the edge, peel the tape back, most of it comes right up, and you have an extremely fine edge, which makes a great place for mounting the rub rails. So I've used this tape to control the flow of the resin, any resin that would sort of run. I've also done it, as you can see, along the bottom. Same thing. Get a real sharp line here. The tape keeps all the resin under control, and it just makes for a super clean installation of the fiberglass cloth, and you wind up with great edges. Well, now the epoxy work is finished on the amas. This is the first coat when I laid down the fiberglass, then the fill coat, and then 2 gloss coats. I used 2 so that I'd have plenty of epoxy for sanding. I have block sanded, seems like it took forever, in between each coat, and what I wound up with was a really nice finish. This is the just the finish. I'm getting ready to start thinking about doing some painting. You might notice that right here, this little strip, that's a little strip where it's been sanded heavily but not recoated with epoxy, and that's where the rub rails are going to go. I wanted to be sure and get a good bond. So the two hulls are just about finished, getting ready for the painting. Unfortunately, that's really the slow part. Well, folks, that's about it for today. Just a little preview of what's coming up. What you're looking at is another example of what they call a clamp intensive exercise. You can see how many clamps I've used, and maybe I didn't have enough. But what I'm doing is I'm getting ready. This is just the dry fitting. I'm dry fitting this 3/4 inch Sapile rub rail. It's been rounded with a router on both sides. And even though I took quite a bit of material off of the 3/4 inch square piece, it's still incredibly hard to bend. I think it's going to be a great rub rail once I get it on. Again, this is just a dry fit. I'm just practicing with all these clamps. But that's what's coming up, and thanks for watching. So long.